Good morning, church. Get up on your feet. We're going to worship this morning.
Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope with no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested and my life began. Ash was redeemed, only beauty remained. My orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made me new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was a ransom he faithfully bore. He canceled my debt and he called me his friend. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose with our freedom in hand. That's when death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace, so free, washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began. That's when death was arrested and my life began.
Good morning, how are we? Man, isn't it great to gather together as the church and to worship Jesus, the author and the perfecter and the finisher of our faith? And death was arrested. He took over. He conquered death and the grave. That means that you and I good, bad. Yes. Oh, ho, ho, ho. I like that, Mike. You are kind of short. It's okay. Where was I saying? Oh, how good Jesus is. Yeah, it sounds like what you would do in a church. Hang on. Sorry. Hey, so isn't it amazing that we have a God who conquered sin and death, and that you and I, even though we may die once, we will live forever because of the debt he paid and the victory that he won on the cross. Man, I'm telling you, I'm excited that we get to gather here today. Do me a favor, if you will. Look around you. Find somebody that you know, someone you don't know. I know this is terrible for introverts. I just want you to be loving and someone else, because you may be the only kind face someone sees all week long. Go say hello and say good morning to somebody right now. Mic check 2. Yep, there we go. Woohoo! Good? Ha, so good, so good, so good. Nice, nice. Hey, listen, my name is Jason Cooper. I'm the lead pastor of the church at Oak Level. So excited to have you with us this Sunday morning. We are going to have a great time together as the church. Notice I said we're gathering as the church. We're not gathering at the church. And here's why. Because we are the church, not this building, not the brick and mortar that surround us, not the roof around us, not even the name on the building. We are the church. And when you gather with the church, you are closer to Jesus Christ than ever before, because we are his body, and we are here to love each other and to equip each other and empower each other to go and be the hands and feet of Jesus all during the course of the week. Now, if you're a first-time guest with us this morning, first of all, we are so honored to have you. We love having you here, simply because we know that you can do 1,001 things, especially here in Central Florida. If you're watching at church@oaklevel.com, we know that you probably are going, if you're watching from anywhere else other than Orlando, you're going, yeah, we don't get to do that much, and we don't have that many options. But here in Orlando, you could have done 1,001 other things, but you chose to be here with the church. And with that in mind, man, we're so honored to have you. In fact, we want to give you a gift, and it's not a cheesy gift. It's not something that we would, you would probably just put on a shelf, or you'd even go home and throw it in the garbage. We want to give you something of value. And all we're going to ask for you to do is, inside the pew back in front of you, there's a communication card. It looks a little bit like this. All we want is just a little basic information from you so that we can know how to engage you better. If you don't want any engagement, that's fine too, but we would love to get to know you and meet you for just a moment. And here's what we're going to ask you to do. At the end of our service today, if you'll fill out that card, if you're a first-time guest, bring it through those doors. Other side of that wall, there's a cafe, and we're going to have some of our leaders and some of our greeters there, and we have a gift, and it's a gift card of a local business here in the area that we love to patronize, and so we would love to be able to give you that gift and exchange that card for that gift card. So make sure you come by and see us. Also, if you're on social media, let me encourage you to check in online. Check in at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever platform you typically use. And if you hear a song lyric, I mean, when death was arrested, man, that's my life began. It's a powerful, powerful word, powerful phrase. And so if you hear a lyric, or maybe even hear something in the message that resonates deep within your soul, check in, and at the end of that post, use the hashtag #IMoveWeMove. Because we as a church, we exist to help people in every season of life take their next steps with Jesus. And as we as individuals move forward, guess what? We as the church take our steps forward as well. Now, I'm going to just tell you one quick tool that I want you to be aware of that some of you have already been using, but I want to make sure that you know that you can use it for a number of other things, and that is the Church at Oak Level app. If you have not downloaded the app, I would encourage you to go do that, because at the end of our service today, we're going to talk about an opportunity that we're going to have with this New Horizons effort that we're looking ahead to 2020 with, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. So if you've not downloaded the Church at Oak Level app, go to your Google Play Store or your iTunes Store and just do a search for the Church at Oak Level. Go ahead and download it, and it's got some really great information. You can go right online. You can listen to archived messages. You can give. You can see service opportunities. You can see life group opportunities. There's so many different ways that you can use the app, and I hope that you'll download it today. Now, we're going to continue to worship. We're going to use music as a tool to express our hearts to God. My heart's desire for you this morning, and it has been, is that you would see God as someone who is kind, someone who is gentle, someone who wants to be with you. Here's the thing. I grew up in a church background where I was told that God was pissed and he was just coming after me, and he was mad because I was constantly doing the wrong things, and he was asking me or telling me that if I messed up, he was going to throw lightning bolts, and he didn't miss. Some of you experienced that exact same thing. Can I tell you? It's a lie from the devil himself. Listen to me. Lean in. God is not angry with you. God's not mad. Some of you, that's the reason you're here today, is you needed to hear that. God is not mad at you. So many of us think that God's just angry, waiting for us to mess up. God's not. He loves you right where you are. He wants to engage you. He wants to be close to you right where you are and just as you are. But here's the thing. He doesn't want you to stay there. So today, we're going to worship together the God who says, come as you are, but don't stay as you are, because the life I have ahead of you is much greater than what you've experienced up until this point. Would you pray with me? God in heaven, how majestic and great is your name. We honor you this morning. We're here to meet with you. We want to experience the power of your presence. We want to know you, God, intimately. Father, we don't want to just go through the motions. We don't want to go through a bunch of routines and go through some lists and think that we've experienced some religious environment. God, we want to truly experience the supernatural presence of your Spirit. Today, we ask you, God, show up and show off. Church, right now, in an attitude of prayer, would you just begin to ask him to come and to speak directly to your heart? Whatever that looks like, however that means, whatever that looks like in your own personal life, whatever that means that you need. I'm distracted, God. I'm frustrated. I'm disappointed. I'm discouraged. I need some encouragement. I need some love. I need some peace. I need some grace. I need provision. God, you are my Jehovah Jireh, my provider. Your grace is sufficient for me. Would you just begin right now just telling him of your need for him, telling him of your love for him? You say, Jason, I'm not a believer. That's fine, and I'm not going to ask you to believe anything that you don't want to believe yet, but I want you to just sit in this moment and just ask this question, what if? What if there's a God who loves you so much that he sent his only son to die on a cross for you, pay the price for your sins so that you could know true life? Because he did. Oh, how great the love of our provider, our Jehovah Jireh. Father, right now, I can sense your presence. I know you're here. And I know that we're welcome right as we are. Thank you. Thank you for this moment of peace in your presence. Let us truly be overwhelmed and let us respond to you because of your great love for us. We anticipate a powerful move of your Spirit In Jesus' name I pray. The church together as one voice said, would you stand to your feet? Let's sing to the one who provides no matter what.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. All the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. All the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Some shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Snow wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Snow shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. Snow wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down,
Jehovah Jireh, you unclench my fist. Through flood, through fire, you are in the midst. You have never left us, and you never will. Jehovah Jireh, you alone are peace. Your power's greater than what our eyes may see. You have never left us, and you never will. You have never left us, and you never will. You go before us, you come behind us, you're always with us, you never let go. Your love is spoken, we can't be stolen, your grip's unbroken, you never let go. You go before us, you come behind us, you're always with us, you never let go. Your love is spoken, we can't be stolen, your grip's unbroken, you never let go. You have never left us, and you never will. You have never left us, and you never will. Jehovah Jireh, you unclench my fist.
You may be seated.
How about you guys? We can just close and go home. Amen? It's good stuff, man. You go before us, you come behind us. We're in this series where we're talking about this story in the Old Testament about the Israelites that were basically led out of Egypt, led out of slavery. And what was amazing is that there was this visible expression of God leading them during the day in a pillar of cloud, like this long column of a cloud. So as the cloud moved, the nation of Israel wasn't really a nation. It was more like just a big extended family of almost 1 million so people. But they would follow the cloud as it moved during the day. And as the sun went down, the cloud would ascend. And then there would be this column of fire that would come down and basically just kind of protect them from the back, but also provide warmth. So when you sing that song, you go before us, you come behind us, you're actually entering into an ancient story of God's provision as we sing about Jehovah Jireh, our provider. We're in this series called Hesitation. Today's week 3. Next week is week 4. We are not going to finish this series during the month of October. Believe it or not, we're going to run this thing all the way through till the first week of November. So you get to put up with the girl being chased and getting that guy right where she wants him. By the way, we're going to show you the end of the story at the end of the series, and she actually guts him like a fish. It's awesome. I'm kidding. Some of you are like, what? I'm coming back to church for that. I'm kidding. Here's what I want you to know. When you are in a horror movie, and we're in the middle of October, so everybody's watching horror movies. Not everyone, but a lot of people are watching horror movies. When you're in a horror movie and you hesitate, typically you die, right? When you're in a horror movie and you hesitate to run, it was funny the other night, we had gotten back, me and the kids had done something. Wendy's actually at the beach right now, God love her. So and I've got a story I'm going to tell you in just a second that you'll love, because I had to bring her in on some stuff because I really almost stepped in it this weekend with just me and the 3 boys. Because typically when it's just me and the 3 boys, they're in loincloths just wandering outside in the front yard for the whole 3 or 4 days that she's gone, and you know, everybody's just kind of fending for themselves. We don't know if they ate or not, and I think I've got 3 of them here, maybe. If not, if you see one of them wandering in the street, just send them my way. But here's what's interesting. We went out the other night. When we got back to the house, the old Friday the 13th was on. Do you remember that? The original, like Jason, the Friday the 13th. It was like sci-fi or something like that. So it was somewhat edited, for a little bit more toned down. But it was so ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. Like, it's late at night. They're at this camp, and this young, beautiful girl wearing a crop top. Of course, that's every camp counselor wears a crop top. She goes, I think I'm going to go for a walk in the dark, cold woods. And she walks off. Anderson goes, who does that? I'm like, that's what she does. You hesitate when you're in a horror movie, and you typically die. And here's the thing. If you are working to move forward in your faith, please hear this, and you're working to move forward in your life, hesitation can also be deadly. If you hesitate to do what you know God's called you to do, you know this is the wise thing, this is the right thing for you to do in your life, but you hesitate on it, it can be deadly. We said early on in this series, hesitation is typically a problem of confidence in us. The reason we hesitate, the reason we don't take a step forward is we kind of don't have enough confidence. In fact, this isn't in your note sheet because we decided to take it out, but I'm going to just go ahead and give you the reminder of what the hesitation definition that we use. Hesitation is an unplanned delay in progress due to a lack of confidence. There's a lack of confidence that you have. And just like in the movies, if you hesitate, it can mean something dies. If you hesitate to ask for forgiveness, a relationship can die. If you hesitate to take that job, your career could die. If you hesitate to say, I'm sorry, your peace could die. And so what we said is we discovered a big overarching truth in the very first week of this series. And I want you to write this down in your note sheets because it's all about confidence in the right person. Here's the deal. Hesitation dies when our confidence thrives in the right person. In the right person. In other words, you won't hesitate when your confidence is grounded in something that is stable and consistent. As a Jesus follower, there are really only 3 options for the source of your confidence. It's yourself. By the way, this goes without saying, we don't have confidence in our circumstances, right? Because our circumstances change in an instant. Our confidence is in a person, has to be in a person. So there's only three options. Number one, you can have confidence in yourself, but my goodness gracious, how many times have you let yourself down? Some of you are like, I don't let myself down. Okay, cool. Let's get real for just a second because we're all friends here. How many of you set a New Year's resolution at the beginning of 2019? Raise your hand. Come on, raise your hand. Okay, see, this is not the same crowd that I had in here on the 3 weeks after New Year's. Because when I asked who has made like a New Year's resolution, hands went up everywhere. So some of you, your New Year's resolution was, I'm not going to lie, and every one of you just failed. Because some of you are like, I didn't make a New Year's resolution. I don't know what he's talking about, okay, right? But here's the thing. If your confidence is in you, you know about January the 12th, you've let yourself down. So don't have confidence in yourself. Second person you can have your confidence in is someone else. And if you let yourself down, my God in heaven, how the people around you have let you down too, right? Third person that you can actually have confidence in is in your Heavenly Father. And so we said your Heavenly Father has given you enough evidence of His providence in your life, His provision, that He is worthy of your confidence. We started reading this story about this huge group of people. God initiated a relationship with them in Egypt. He freed them from slavery. He's now taking them to a brand new land that they could settle into and they could begin to live and they could begin to express His love to the world, not just to them, but to the world. And God gave them tons of evidence that He could be trusted to provide for them, and that if He was leading them to the land, He would be there to help them take the land as they went in as well. So when they get to the land, here's what's amazing. They said to Moses, hey, I think we need to send some spies into the land, like check things out, make sure. And God's going, I've already told you, I've already spied the land out. I'm going to go with you. But if you need to send some spies in, go ahead and send some spies into the land. And the spies return, and last week we heard what most of the men who told the people, they gave them a report, they said some things, and the people heard them. Last week we talked about the idea of what you hear. Be careful because it can cause hesitation. And they said this to the people, they said, yeah, the land is good, but there are some big obstacles. There are some big hurdles that we're going to have to face. And the Bible says that these spies, these leaders, argued amongst themselves in front of the people, and they spread a bad report about the land among the people as well. So much so that the Israelites thought that it would be better to select a new leader that would lead them back to Egypt so they could die there. But there were two guys from the 12 who said, no. Listen, yes, there's some risk involved. Yes, there's some challenges. Yes, there's obstacles to taking the promised land. By the way, just a side note, for you to move into the land that God has for you, for you to move into the life that God has for you, there will be obstacles. Let me pause this for just a second. This is another message for another time. I'll put it right here. The reason God takes you through things that you can't get through on your own is so you will lean in His direction. Because if you could do it on your own, you wouldn't need Him. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. You have to go through some things that are difficult so that God can reveal Himself to you and say, look how faithful I am. Let your confidence be rooted in me and in me alone. Another message for another day. Here's what I want you to hear. It is inevitable that when you are listening to people in your world, people are going to speak into your life. People are going to say things to you. The Israelites spread a bad report among the people, and they said, let's die in the land. These two guys, the guys' names are Joshua and Caleb. They both said, no, let's not do that. God is with us. Yes, there's a challenge. Yes, there's some obstacles. Let's not rebel against the Lord. Listen, you're going to hear a lot of things, and some things can cause you to hesitate in your faith, hesitate in your life. Could be good, could be bad, could be positive, could be negative. The bottom line is you're always going to hear from others, but you have to recognize that what you hear from others can either propel you or it can prohibit you, which means that listening to the right people can either advance your faith or listening to the wrong people can hinder your life. Listen, what you hear can hurt you or help you. And we said that not only you need to pay attention to what you're hearing from other people, but you also need to pay attention to what you're saying to other people as well. What are other people hearing from you? Now, today we're going to go a little bit further into this story, and we're going to get you thinking by telling you how I almost got in trouble this weekend. So I have three sons, those of you that do not know. My youngest is 10, my middle's 13, and my oldest is 16. And they all three play recreation basketball with the Junior Magic organization. And so they all have different practice nights, and they all have games on Saturdays. And typically the games are anywhere between 11 and 12, or 12 and 1, and then 3 and 4, and then 4 and 5. So it's like all day, every day. I have an indention on my backside of the entire bleachers because I sit there for hours on Saturdays. And so Anderson, my oldest, who's 16 years old, and I got permission so I could tell this story. Anderson yesterday was kind of bragging at lunch. He was saying, yeah, Dad, I'm going to drop 30 today. I'm like, you dropping $30 for the tip? What are you talking about? You're going to drop 30? What does that mean? And I'm like, is that something the kids are saying now? And he's like, no, I'm going to drop 30 points at the game. I'm like, you're cute. He said, no, I'm serious. And I said, okay, cool. Last week, he said the same thing. So I told him, I said, tell you what. Now, please understand, my kids are good athletes. They really are. And I've seen my kids score a lot of points, but I've never seen them score 30 points. Never seen them get to that point. And so Anderson's telling me last week, he's like, Dad, I'm going to drop 30. I said, cool, I'll give you $100 if you drop 30 today. I think last week he was, 14, 15 points. I'm like, he got halfway there. So I'm thinking my bet is good. This week at lunch, Dad, I'm going to drop 30. Cool, son. I'll give you $1,000. Y'all, it just got real. Because my son was motivated like nobody's business. He goes out on the court. First of all, he didn't come off the court at all. At one point, about halfway through the game, and I realized I was starting to lose this thing, I almost walked to the coach and gave him $100 and said, bench my son. I was that close because I thought it's going to be cheaper for me to spend 100 than to spend 1,000. Well, all of a sudden the game starts. Anderson's running the point guard. If those of you that knows basketball, he's running point. And about 4 or 5 minutes left in the first half, he's at 14 points. So he is on pace. And this kid is hitting three-pointers, y'all. He's hitting three-pointers. I think at the end of the day, he had a total of 6 three-pointers. And one of them he fired from probably well beyond the NBA court, the three-point line, which was really cool. And as soon as he fired it up, I'm like, from way downtown. I'm like commentating. Everybody around me's laughing. But everybody around me also knew that I had told him I'd give him $1,000. So they're all cheering for him. I'm cheering against him. And he's running the point, which means that every time the other team would score, they dish the ball into Anderson. So Anderson drives the ball up the court, and he's like, I'm going to just pull up from here. Right there, boom. And I'm going, dang it. So at about the second half, we're about halfway through the second half, he's at about 18 points. I'm now texting Wendy. Hey, I'm really sorry about this, but we're probably going to be down $1,000 when you get back from the beach because Anderson is on fire. And I had made this decision. I'd made this statement to him. And I'd reached a point of no return. Like it was going to happen. He got to the end of the game. They lost by, I don't remember, it was just a couple of 10 points, something like that, 9, 10 points, something like that. He finished the game with 22 points. Yeah. So I lost 5 years of my life with the stress and the heartache. Woke up this morning with heartburn. I'm like, it's okay. I don't have to pay him $1,000. So instead, we went and got Slurpees because that's a great consolation prize to that. Here's why I tell you that story. Here's why I tell you that story. Have you ever gotten yourself into something and you knew you couldn't get out of it? Yeah, right. You're like, oh my goodness, what did I just say? What did I just do? How did I make that decision? Why in the world would I ever go there and do that? Listen, you had a chance to get out of it early on, right? I'm thinking while I was at lunch, and Anderson said, yeah, Dad, I'm going to drop 30 today. I'm thinking that was my chance to go, shh, don't speak. Don't even say I'll give you 100 for 30. But I wanted to motivate him. So I'm like, son, I'll give you 1,000. And as soon as I saw the words fly out of my mouth, I'm like, I can't get them back. They're out for good, and they're not coming back. Here's what's amazing. Do you remember back years ago, those of you that are over the age of 30, you probably remember this. Do you remember the record clubs? Remember record clubs? You get the little postcard that said you can get 487 CDs for 15 cents, right? And you would sign up for it and send it back, and they'd send you a box, and you had all these CDs, and you're like, this is the best deal ever. until you realized that they were charging you $30 for every CD every month for the rest of your life. And there was no way to get out of that contract. It's the same thing with health clubs. If you remember back in the 80s and the 90s, health clubs weren't like Planet Fitness today where you could just go in and like from week to week or just show up and just, go in for a couple of days and then be like done with it. You signed up for a health club and you were in it for life. You had to die to get out of your contract with your health club, right? There are some things in life that we know that once you sign on the dotted line, once you make that decision, once you pull the trigger, you're in it for good. You're stuck. There's no going back. It is the point of no return. Let me just tell you this real quick. You have to understand this. It is often very difficult to know when you've reached that point. It's very difficult to know. Think about it. When you go back and you look at some of the most pivotal moments in your life, you see that moment and how it happened, but you see it now. You can't go back and go, oh, this is that moment. Right now, I am at a point of no return. I don't know why, but it just feels like this is it. But then you couldn't see it. Now you can see it. It was when you made that decision to call him back. That was a point of no return. It was that moment when you decided to ask her out. Now all of a sudden you've got a ton of kids and you've built a life together, and it's the point of no return. It's like, I'm going into this. I don't know that this is the very decision that's going to lead me to not go back, but this is it. And looking back on it, I can see it very, very clearly now. Maybe it was when you applied for that job and you got it, and at first you didn't think anything about it, but you now look back at it and go, you know what, I didn't know that I would like this, but now I love it. Like, this is what I want to do with my life. It was a point of no return. It could be when you agreed to take that trip and you weren't really sure that you would enjoy it, but it ended up changing your life because you met a person and you connected in such a way that there was a friendship that is now bonded for life. Here's the deal. In the most pivotal moments of our lives, hesitation can often mean that we make the wrong decision. We end up with consequences that we don't want. When you hesitate, you can end up with consequences that you don't want simply because you've crossed a point of no return. So here's the nation of Israel. They've heard all sides of the story. Yes, the land is good, but no, the land is good and God is with us. Let's move. They've heard both sides, and they chose to go with the majority opinion that said that God is not good and the land is not good. Let's die in the wilderness. And they wept and they whined and they complained because they were scared. By the way, nothing had happened to them yet. They were just what-ifing. They had lost faith that the God who brought them there wouldn't see them through the conquest of the land. And they said things like, we should have died in the desert. We should have died in Egypt. So here's what we're going to do. Let's choose some new leaders who will take us back to Egypt and die. There were 4 guys who said, you know what? Let's try to do the right thing. Moses and Aaron, who had been leading the nation of Israel up until that point, and then these 2 guys, Joshua and Caleb, who were part of the 12 spies, said, let's not hesitate. Let's take the land. God is with us. And that's where we pick up the story. Take a look. Numbers 14, verse 10. But, and we see, every time we see the word but in the scriptures, you know something's about to change. But, in other words, the land is good, God is good, and he's with us. And Caleb and Joshua said, let's not rebel against God. But the whole community began to talk about what? Say it out loud. The whole community began to talk about stoning Joshua and Caleb. It's like, whoa, that escalated quickly. I mean, so we don't want to go into this land because there's uncertainty, there's risk. So let's pick some new leaders who will lead us there. Oh yeah, and by the way, Joshua and Caleb, let's kill them. And Moses and Aaron too, because they're trying to call us out on this. They're going to try to stand in our way of doing what we want instead of what God wants. And those men had done nothing wrong that would warrant them being killed. Now this is massive. In their hesitation to do what God told them to do, they made a critical choice. Hesitating in the face of the goodness of God is a moment definer for your life. Hesitation in the face of the goodness of God is a game changer. Write this in your notes. Big point of the day. Hesitation eventually leads you to a point of no return. And when you reach that point, listen, the consequences are yours. When you reach that point, they're yours. Good or bad, positive or negative, once you get to that point, God will still, please hear this, God will still be with you, and we're going to see that next week as we bring this thing to a close, or bring it to a kind of summary, but God's going to stay with you, but the results, the consequences will be yours. You see, up until this point, there was hope that Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb could actually persuade them to take the land and do what God had called them to do. And now the people are talking about killing the only guys who were telling them to do the right thing. And in that moment, in that split second, everything changed. Their hesitation had become permanent. They were not going to do what God called them to do. Listen, there comes a point in your life where your hesitation will lead you to a point of no return. It's like a fork in the road. It's like where once you've chosen the path, you're committed and there's no going back. How many of you have ever been ziplining? Raise your hand. Zipline people. Raise them up. Zipline people? Okay, cool. So you know what it's like to zipline, right? You get on the zipline, you climb up the little ledge or whatever, and you stand on the edge, you're right there on the ledge of the jump-off point, and there's a line that goes all the way across. Maybe it's a ravine, could be a lake, could be like a big open canyon, whatever it is. Could be the open ocean, down in, I think it's in Labadee, Haiti, where the cruise ships stop. There's this huge zip line that just goes all the way across like the bay. It's beautiful over this overhang that you can go on this zip line. But here's the thing. Do you know what happens when you go on the zip line? You get up there, and the first time you go up to the edge of that zip line, and you're like, what have I done? And you do what? You hesitate, right? Because you know the moment you step off, there's no going back. The moment you let go of the ledge, there's no going back. You can't wake up and go, oh, no, I was just kidding. Let me go back. It's the same way. How many of you have ever been skydiving? Whoo! Some of you skydivers, y'all are some brave people. We're going to have prayer over you in just a few minutes, but you go skydiving, right? So here's what I'd like to go skydiving. I wouldn't mind going skydiving. Got to work my nerve up too. Do you know the reason why, if you've never been skydiving, that they attach you to somebody else? Because if you were on your own, you'd never get out of the plane. You would stand there at the entrance to this open door going, why am I going to jump out of a perfectly good plane? And everybody behind you would be going, can you please get out of the way? You're holding up progress, so they strap you to someone else so that you don't get the opportunity to hesitate. So that when you step out of that plane, what happens? Well, I'm going to fly back. I'm swimming back to the plane. I was just kidding. I don't want to jump. The moment you jump, you're committed. The consequences are yours. Good or bad, positive or negative, the consequences are yours. Now listen, the moment you make that decision, you as a responsible person, they belong to you. The consequences are yours. Israel, being a responsible people, had to accept the full consequences of their decision. Let me also throw this out. Take a look. If you notice that it says the whole community talked about stoning them. You know what that sounds like, right? Like the whole community. Like there's hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, and the whole community. Can I just say this? That means that there are probably some people that weren't really necessarily saying, let's stone them. But because they were all lumped in together, they were all one community talking about stoning their leaders. Some people may have been in the community going, maybe Joshua and Caleb have a point. I mean, I'm not really sure, but I'm not ready to believe them yet. But maybe, who knows? Here's the deal. When you hesitate, you could be in danger of getting swept away in a current you didn't really want to be in. In fact, write this in your notes. The longer you hesitate, the quicker others decide for you. Let me say that again. The longer you hesitate, the quicker others decide for you. And depending on who you run with, it'll determine whether that's a good thing or not. Proverbs 13 verse 20 says this, when you walk with the wise, you become what? But if you associate with fools, you will get in. In other words, you hang out with the right people, you'll grow from it. But if you hang out with the wrong people, you won't just become foolish like they are. You'll actually suffer harm for it. When you're running with the wrong group, you may reach a point of no return in your hesitation, just like the entire community of Israel. Here's how we know that they've reached the point of no return for them. Watch this. End of verse 10. They've just they've been discussing, they're saying they're going to stone these leaders, and the Bible says, then. Let me pause for just a second. As in, immediately. As in, right then. As in, there was no delay, no pause, right then. They started talking about stoning their leaders then. the glorious presence of the Lord appeared to all of the Israelites at the tabernacle. Why? Because two of the faithful ones he'd allowed to spy out the land, and Moses and Aaron were under the threat of death. So God stepped in right here. Look, come on. So God said, look, Moses, Aaron, Joshua, Caleb, check this out. This is so cool. Your confidence is rooted so deeply in me that I'm not going to let them do it. I'm going to step in because you've had confidence that I'm going to be who I said I was going to be, and I am not going to let them stone you. I'm going to step in. I'm going to prevent what happened. Why? Because you have maintained your confidence in me, and you've acted in that way. Wow. I don't know about you. If I'm Joshua and Caleb and God shows up, the moment they start talking about stoning me, I'm like, yeah, get them, Dad, right? I'm like, y'all in trouble. Ooh, you done it now, man. See, that's what we would have done. We would have said, oh, watch this. God's going to get them, strike them all dead. Watch what God does. So cool, verse 11. The Lord said to Moses, so he appears and all of the Israelites know God's here. And he says to Moses, because Moses is the leader that God had raised up. By the way, just a couple of chapters before, they'd been doing some things following the outsiders that were not with them, but they were kind of outsiders, and kind of doing the things that the outsiders or the foreigners in their midst or around them had been doing. And Moses was like, you people aren't doing what God's called you to do. And so he goes to God and he goes, God, am I responsible for these people? So just a couple of chapters before, Moses is actually saying, I don't want to be responsible for them. Now all of a sudden God says, let me tell you something, Moses. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you what I'm about to do. So he's actually going to test Moses, because Moses is probably thinking, they're after me. Like, they're coming after me. They're trying to stone me for doing the right thing. Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? Not you. Yeah, they're trying to stone you, but it's really because they're mad at me. In other words, watch this. Their hesitation led them to this point where there's no turning back. And God says, do you know what that is? It's contempt for me. Let me just break that down. You know what contempt means? The actual word that he uses is despise. Why do the people despise me? In other words, they're making a choice. Right? You don't just wake up one day and go, I despise you. Well, why do you do that? Because I just feel like it. Despising someone is a choice. And get this, whenever you make a choice, please hear this, there are always consequences, one way or the other. Could be positive, could be negative, but once the choice is made, you get to live in those consequences. Write this down. Hesitation can cause terrible choices that lead to devastating consequences. Hesitation can cause terrible choices that lead to devastating consequences. Listen to what God said. Will they never believe me? Even after all the miraculous signs I've done among them? In other words, I've given them plenty of proof. I've given them plenty of reasons to have confidence in me, to know that if I've called them to it, I'll see them through it. He says, I'm going to disown them. Ooh, this gets like creepy. I want you just for a second. I just want you to process. What would it look like for you to be in the nation of Israel in this moment? And you listen to these 12 guys that come back. 10 of them said, we can't do it. 2 of them are like, yes, we can do it. And you started listening to the murmuring around you, saying, let's kill these guys and do what we want to do. And all of a sudden, God shows up. Now, real quick, listen. And the moment he shows up, and he says these words to Moses, think of this being you. I will disown them, and I'm going to destroy them with a plague. And then I'm going to make you into a greater nation and mightier than they are. Time out. Just a side note. This was not God making a final decree. This was God testing Moses. This was God saying, I'm just making a threat on the people. Because see, he is God, and he made a covenant with a man named Abraham. years and years and years and years before. And check this out. He's not going to break his covenant with Abraham just so he could start over with Moses. But what he's doing is he's testing Moses. Hey, Moses, just a couple of chapters ago, you were really upset about what the nation was doing. And you said, do I have to answer for these people? I just want to see, Moses, are you okay? Because their consequences are now theirs, and I still need you to lead them through their consequences. Are you okay with doing that? This is huge. So he's not trying to say, I'm making this decision. He says, I want to just see. Moses, are you there to stand up for this group of people and defend them right now? I'll disown them. Destroy them with a plague. Then I'll make you into a greater nation and mightier than they are. Verse 13. But Moses, what? Objected. Which means God chose well when he picked Moses to lead. Here's what Moses said. What will the Egyptians think when they hear about it? They know full well the power you displayed. Let me hold on to that for just a second. Power you displayed in rescuing your people from Egypt. Why? Because God had sent all these plagues. We know this. And then he told on the last plague that he would send to Israel, to Egypt, he told the Israelites to trust him and sacrifice lambs and paint their blood on the doorpost as their evidence of their trust in God. And by the way, listen, when God told the Israelites to do that, they didn't hesitate. And that night, every firstborn in Egypt died, except for those whose doorposts were covered. And in that moment, the Egyptians saw God's power and strength because they didn't hesitate in obeying. Verse 14, Moses says, now if you destroy them, those same people that you saved, the Egyptians will send a report to the inhabitants of this land. In other words, the land we're about to go into, who have already heard that you live among your people. In other words, your reputation precedes you. They know, Lord, that you've appeared to your people face to face, and that your pillar of cloud hovers over them. They know that you go before them in the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Now, if you slaughter all these people with a single blow, the nations that have heard of your fame, they'll say the Lord was not able to bring them into the land he swore to give them, so he killed them in the wilderness. And again, hear this. This was not God having his mind made up and then Moses talking him out of something. God didn't change his mind. He knew exactly what he was doing. He's reinstating Moses as the leader that's going to lead them through the consequences that are fully theirs now. And like I said, next week we're going to look at the consequences that he actually lays out. In their hesitation, the people had reached a point of no return, and God wanted them to know that there were real consequences that they would have to deal with from that point on. And he's letting Moses prove that he can continue to lead this group, even knowing what lies ahead of them. But Moses says this, verse 17, please, Lord, prove that your power is as great as you have claimed. Watch. Now, because of their hesitation, Moses is asking God to show his strength and power. But wait. Moses, don't you get? God's been showing his strength and power all along through miracles and visible expressions of his presence. I mean, why are you saying that he's not visible? Listen, he had, but because of the Israelites' hesitation, his presence was not visible to the world that was watching. If you're a follower of Jesus, may I say this to you? Write this down. When you hesitate in your faith, you limit the display of God's strength and glory. Let me just say this. In other words, you make my God look bad. When you hesitate, it says to the watching world around you, you know what? He doesn't really believe that his God is all that. Otherwise, why would he hesitate? Her God's not all powerful like she thinks that he is. If he was, she would trust him now, and she'd trust him to walk with her through this season. But she's not. By the way, notice that statement. That doesn't say that when you hesitate, you limit God's strength and glory, right? It's that you limit the what? The display. You limit the display of God's glory and his strength. It's the outward evidence of his strength in your life. Listen, people stop seeing the evidence of God's power in your life when you refuse to take another step in your journey. Moses goes on, verse 17, the end of it. For you said, and he's reminding God, and God's going, okay, cool, so you've actually been listening. I'm glad, Moses, pay attention. Verse 18, you've said the Lord is slow to anger, filled with unfailing love, forgiving every kind of sin and rebellion. Moses knows exactly who he's dealing with. He has confidence in the God that he's been serving. But we know that he doesn't excuse the guilty. In other words, there's consequences to your decisions. By the way, let me just say this. You can be a follower of Jesus and have a bunch of consequences to stupid, sinful stuff that you do. And know that God still loves you. Like I said, next week, consequences, but God was with them. He never left them. Here's what I want you to see. You can make dumb, stupid decisions as a follower of Jesus, and those consequences are yours. God's not going to rescue you from stupidity. We have a saying around our house that if you're going to be stupid, you better be big and strong and brave and tough, because stupid hurts. Right? And if you're going to be stupid, you got to know God's going to go with you. He's not going to let you down. He's not going to let you fail. But you may end up experiencing some consequences that you never intended and you would have never chosen for yourself in the past. And you would never choose for yourself in the future. Here's what Moses says that God, he's reminding God of what he says. He says, he lays the sins of the parents upon their children. In other words, there's consequences. Your consequences that you're facing. Listen, mom and dad, please don't miss this. Your kids will never prioritize what you marginalize. If your faith is not a priority to your life, your kids will not grow up with a priority of their faith in theirs. You've got to make your faith in Christ the priority of your life so that when your kids grow up, they're like, I watched mom and dad. They weren't perfect. God knows no one is, but their priority was in their faith. You will never see your kids prioritize what you marginalize. If you compromise in the area of your personal faith with Jesus, if you compromise in the area of gathering with the local church on a consistent basis to grow and to be encouraged and to be equipped and to be empowered to be the church out in the community, please don't expect your kids one day to wake up and miraculously have this bright, vibrant faith that sustains them and fulfills them as they see the days ahead of them roll past. He lays the sins of the parents upon their children. Their entire family is affected. Even children in the third, fourth generations. Your hesitation can touch hundreds of years from now. By just waiting. By not doing what God's called you to do. By not stepping into the land God's promised that he's going to give you and walk with you as you take it. So Moses says, in keeping with your magnificent, unfailing love, please pardon the stupidity of this people. Pardon the sins of this people, just as you've forgiven them ever since they left Egypt. Because, by the way, this wasn't the first time they acted like idiots. This wasn't the first time they'd acted in rebellion towards God when they left Egypt. Do you remember what happened when Moses went up onto the side of Mount Sinai and God was giving him the 10 Commandments and he came back down the mountain? Remember what the people had done? They told Aaron, hey, Moses has been gone for a while. We needed God to worship. Let's take all the gold, melt it down, make a calf, and worship that. When I make the statement on Sundays a lot of times that we do not worship a God made by human hands, we worship a God who made human hands, I mean that. In the absence of worshiping the one true God, you'll worship something you create as opposed to someone that created you. Moses is coming to the defense of his people, which is what God had for him all along. That's why he spoke to Moses. But the Israelites had reached the point of no return, and there would be consequences to their hesitation and to their actions, which we'll see next week when we finish, or when we summarize the series. But today I want to focus on just this one thing. Eventually, your hesitation will lead you to a point of no return. And in that moment, the consequences are yours, for better or for worse. So let me ask you this. What is your point of no return? When does your hesitation become irrecoverable? By the way, not when is God going to abandon you, because he won't. And we're going to see what he did next week. But when do you know that you can't go back to the ledge? When do you know, for you personally, that you cannot go back to the entrance of the plane? I want to just briefly give you 4 signs that you're at or you're close to your point of no return. And these 4 things come straight out of this passage. Number 1, when you ignore good direction from someone or someones that you've learned to trust. You ignore good direction from someone you've learned to trust. Just like the people raged against these 4 leaders that they had learned to trust. By the way, someone who hates to be reformed hates those who would reform them. Going so far as to call them enemies because they tell them what they don't want to hear. By the way, this is like when you were a kid and your parents told you should do something and you knew it was the right thing to do, but you didn't do it anyway. Because you were like, yeah, I trust them, but you know what? I want things my way. Yeah, I know it's the right thing to do, but it's my parents telling me that, so why would I want to go do what my parents tell me to do? Can I just say this? Proverbs 27, verse 9. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. So when someone that you trust gives you insight and gives you advice and counsel and speaks into your life, you might want to listen, because in that moment they may be telling you something that you don't see for yourself. You're hesitating. You're getting close to a point of no return. Ignore counsel from a friend to your own detriment. Proverbs 12:15 says this, fools think that their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. You listen when someone you love and trust and who know that loves you and gives you good direction, and you ignore it, you may be at a point of no return, and the consequences may be irrecoverable. Second thing, to let you know that you're close to the edge, you're close to stepping off, is this. You let others make decisions for you even if you're not fully on board. You let others make decisions for you even if you're not fully on board. Listen, when you don't make decisions for your own life, be prepared for someone else to make them for you. And they may not be what you want, and you may end up stuck somewhere that you didn't want to be. Best example that I can think of this concept of let others make decisions for you even if you're not fully on board is when you're asked this question in just a few minutes. Where do you want to go to lunch after church? Listen, if you hesitate to give an answer and your kids are the majority in the car, you may end up at Chuck E. Cheese's to your own detriment. Listen, it can happen at your work. It can happen in your family. It can happen in your finances. When you hesitate to make the wise decision that you know would honor God, someone else may make a decision for you, and it could take you somewhere you didn't want to be, just like the nation of Israel. Third, how do you know that you're at the edge? You're right there at that really close point to no return. Number 3, others see less of God's power and glory in your life. Others see less of God's power and glory in your life. Again, not saying that you limit God's power and glory. You're not that powerful. The only thing that you could do in your hesitation, nearing your point of no return, is to limit people seeing God's strength and power in your life. Because when you make decisions after prayerful consideration that's going to honor God, people will see that. And that becomes an act of worship. But when you know God is telling you to do something and you resist it, people stop seeing His hand in your life. Fourth thing, the moment you begin to experience consequences you never wanted, you may be already past the point of no return. This is perhaps the most telling way to know that you're at or near that point is when you start fielding consequences that you never wanted. A relationship ended. You would have never wanted that relationship to end, but because there were some steps that you took and you stepped off the ledge and there was no going back, that relationship is irrecoverable. It could be that you made a financial decision and now a bill comes every single month with a whole lot of monthly payments attached to it. And you're like, and you've reached a point of no return. It could be a doctor telling you something you didn't want to hear. And here's why. Because you hesitated to take care of your body years ago, and now you're dealing with some consequences that you don't want. So let me ask you this. Is there an area of your life where you're hesitating right now, and you're thinking that you're really close to the no going back point? Is there a place maybe in your faith journey where you're hesitating? Right? You know, God is telling you to be obedient in this area of your life, and He's saying it over and over and over again, and you hear it in so many different multiple ways. Isaiah 55 verse 6 says it like this: seek the Lord now while He may be found. which implies that there may be a chance that if you resist him more and more, you just build up big scars around your heart so that you can no longer hear from God. It's not that God's going to leave you. It's not that God's going to get rid of you. It's just that you won't be able to hear his voice anymore because you resisted him too long. Here's what I need you to know. What is that point where you've reached in hearing from God and God saying, this is what I want you to do, here's where I want you to go, here's how I want you to be obedient, and yet you're not doing it? Where is that hesitation in you? Where is that area of hesitation in your life? Is it making him the priority for your family? Is it saying no to the good, listen to me, so that you can say yes to the great? By the way, just a side note, yes, my kids all play sports, but the priority for my family is my faith, our faith in Jesus. This is not to condemn or anything, it's not to judge, but if there's something where a sport or an extracurricular activity, we had a conversation this morning about Fortnite. When there is something that begins to step over the priority that I've set for our family, guess what happens? That goes away. Because I'm not going to have my children and my children's children dealing with the consequences of my hesitation when God's called me to make him the priority of my family. It could be that you would make him the priority of your finances. It's an area that we've been talking about recently. You say, oh, I love Jesus. Yes, I do. But here's the thing. Your checkbook, your bank account, your calendar, those two things show you what your priorities are. And some of you that would say, yes, I'm making God my priority. He's the priority of my time. He's the priority of my money. But there's no proof. It could be that you're hesitating and you're really close to that point of no return. Maybe it's to connect in a smaller group so that you can begin to get to know yourself even more as we look at the transforming power of self-awareness that's coming next week. When we talk about how we're wired, how we see the world, and get to know the good parts and those parts that have been unredeemed in us. Could be to serve someone, could be more generous. Let me ask you this. What about in your calling? Are you hesitating right now to apply for that job or to apply for that promotion? But you know that it's going to allow you to step into a new role that's going to allow you to be a beacon of light for other people? What about your relationships? You have to know, in those moments, you won't feel that God is with you when you're hesitating. That's the thing. You won't feel that God is with you because you're hesitating. But I need you to understand, you're hesitating to do what he has called you to do. And hear this, if you feel that God is not with you, you need to understand it's because you pushed away from him and not because he pushed away from you. He's not pushed away from you. Hesitation will lead you to a point of no return. And once you're there, there's consequences to deal with. My challenge to you today is very, very simple. Step away from the ledge. Step back from the open door on the plane. Stop hesitating where you know you should step forward into obedience to God's leading, or be prepared for the consequences that you didn't want. And by the way, you know that those consequences, they're going to impact more than just you. It's going to be impacting your friends, your family. It could be impacting this church. It could impact so much more than just you. And for us, we don't want to be a church who hesitates. And we're not. In fact, one of the biggest things that we're doing right now is we're moving forward. We're expanding our ministry. We're not maintaining it. We're expanding it. Because we believe that God has called us into a brand new season of ministry as a church. And so for me as a pastor, I'm saying we're not going to hesitate. Yeah, there are risks. Yeah, there are challenges. Yes, there are obstacles. But if our God is for us, who can stand against us? And we as a church want to be the type of people who says we know what God's called us to do, and we want to help people in every season of life take their next steps with Jesus, and we're going to take our next step together because I believe that life is too short